Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. Today is Sunday, November 23rd, 2025, and we have a fascinating conversation in store for you with one of the candidates whom we have recently endorsed via the vote of our members that transpired between August and early September of 2025. So joining us today is our panel of distinguished U.S. Transhumanist Party officers and members, including our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our member from Texas who heads the Texas Transhumanist Party, Alan Crowley, and we will have Daniel Tweed joining us shortly. Daniel Tweed is our Director of Community and Citizen Science, and our 2024 U.S. Vice Presidential candidate. Daniel is here at present, so welcome, Daniel. And our special guest for today is Timothy Grady. Timothy Grady is running for governor of Ohio. Our members voted by a significant margin to endorse him. We announced that endorsement on September 4th, 2025. And also, I would like to share with you Timothy Grady's campaign website, which is timgradyforohio.com. So please visit it, check it out to learn about Mr. Grady's campaign stances. So, Tim Grady, welcome, and please tell us a bit more about yourself, why you're running for governor of Ohio, and perhaps some events that have transpired either in your history leading up to the campaign or in the campaign thus far.
Hi, my name is Tim Grady, independent candidate for governor of Ohio 2026. Thank you for having me. Thank you also for the endorsement. I have been a follower of the Transhumanist Party since 2016. I've always been interested in the power of technology to advance humanity and to provide a better, more prosperous life and world for all of us. So it, to me, seemed like a natural fit and why I sought out an endorsement. One of the reasons I am running for governor is, well, because it is the lowest practical office for me to run for to advance my goals of mobilizing the people of Ohio and people of America to demand a better system, a better politics, a better government, more responsive, less corrupt. Running for governor, people often say, aim for a lower office first. This is the office with the most reach. It's the office with the most power to get stuff done that will allow me to inspire more people. And we have, over just 5 months, I launched my campaign at the end of June. We have continued to grow and inspire people. I've met many people who across from the political spectrum are interested in getting involved in supporting this campaign. And in one of the things I often do, I want more people to run for office, and I am helping other people get involved to run as independents, as Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, whatever. I want more people to run for office. I'm trying to show that it can be done. I am literally a random person, and I am successfully running for governor. In fact, I kind of like my chances right now. But I'm also running because and mobilizing people because I think we are in a pretty dire situation politically. Our country is more divided than it has been in, I think, over a century at least. We have stagnated. We've run out of ideas, it seems, from the Democrats and Republicans. They've been having the same fights for decades and getting nowhere. And devolving into basically negative partisanship as the only way to keep going, to keep staying in power. People don't vote for a party anymore. They vote against the other party. And that's not what we need. We need vision. We need inspiration. We need people who see a future for this country and are ready to fight for that. That's kind of one of my slogans: fight for the future, fight for our future, because I believe there's a future for this country. I believe there's a great future for this country and for all of humanity. And one of the beautiful things about democracy is that we get to choose. At the end of the day, it's not your party infrastructure. It's not how much money you have or can spend. It's one person, one vote, and everyone has agency. Everyone has choice. And really the biggest problem is the coordination problem of getting everyone to realize that, yeah, this is our power, not just our power, but our responsibility. And that's more background on me. I have been in the independent, third-party, centrist political space for over a decade, not because I really like politics. I actually find it very frustrating and a terrible drain on time, but I'm in it because I think there is something I can do for this world. I think we can have a better politics, and so I feel an obligation to act to do that. In 2018, I was a Libertarian candidate for state representative. I was never a part of the Libertarian Party. I was a state representative candidate because of the very special situation in which I could do it, help them get a choice on the ballot without officially becoming part of their party under Ohio law. But I have supported other libertarians. I have supported and worked with Greens, Independents, Democrats, and Republicans. I have managed local campaigns for Democrats, for state representative, for mayor of my city, because I live in a very red district and I believe in having more choices, and I want good choices on the ballot. So I want serious campaigns. I live in a district in a county where most of the elections go uncontested because, and that is not what democracy is about. Democracy is really about giving people choices to kind of aggregate knowledge for people making the best possible choices. And if you don't give good choices to choose from, you're not really using that power to the best of its ability. And throughout most of the country, throughout Ohio especially, we're not a two-party system. We're a one-party system divided geographically. All of Ohio statewide is an extremely Republican area, but we are also so gerrymandered that there are places where it's only Democrats are on the ballot, only Democrats can run, or only Republicans can win. Some counties, some cities are entirely Democrat controlled. Anywhere you go, it's really one party, and that breeds corruption. It breeds a lack of accountability, and it does not make for a competitive free market of ideas, which is what we need. I joined the Forward Party at the end of 2022. I eventually, in October or November of 2023, was elected chair of the Ohio Forward Party and oversaw it for the next 15 months, trying to build it from a very informal group of like 10 to 12 people active, and tripling the number of active volunteers, getting our bylaws, having our state convention, electing a board because it's very important to have democracy. And in January of 2025, I resigned the Forward Party chair, Ohio Forward Party chair, to really try and pursue something like this, because as chair of the Ohio Forward Party, I wasn't really supposed to have strong opinions, not supposed to voice stuff. And that was my role, more administrative, and I get that. But we also needed people who would be out there articulating a vision for the future, taking policy stances. And that's what I wanted to do. I think party building is very important to me. Building a new political party matters. I think it's what we need. And I think this is the historical moment in which that is possible, with Democratic and Republican Party approval at historic lows, internal divisions within those parties, more Americans than ever identifying as independent, more Americans than ever saying that they would support a new political party given the choice. We need to build that choice, though, because you cannot beat something with nothing. So that's what I'm out here for, to unite people around a common vision and to build the infrastructure and mobilize the people to get that done. As I said, I launched my campaign in late June. It has gone much better than I could have ever expected, though still obviously like to be going a little faster. I was endorsed by the Transhumanist Party and the Pirate Party, who you are in alliance with, the All Hands Coalition, which
All Hands for a Free Future. Yes.
Free Future, that's it. And I love that. And I think your party, Pirate Party, other parties generally are coalescing around this idea, which is no longer represented in the Democratic or Republican parties, of basically freedom, classical liberalism, one might say, but also a commitment to technology, to the future, to caring about the future, to caring about future generations and the world that we're building just as much as the present. And also understanding that solving problems means actually looking at the data, looking at technology, trying to engineer better solutions, not just limit ourselves to fund this, defund that, tax this, don't tax that. It's more holistic, more recognizing the power of humanity to overcome and what we have overcome. It's more optimistic. It is more focused on what we can do, what we can be, rather than what divides us. To be an independent candidate, I must collect 5,000 signatures, valid signatures, by May 4th. We've collected over 1,100 so far. Now heading into winter, we'll probably shift our collection focus. Really, the plan is to collect a ton in March and April as we build up our volunteer capacity. We've had dozens and dozens of volunteer signups. It's just a lot of them are political neophytes, because we are attracting new people who haven't gotten involved in politics before because they don't feel represented. And we have to train them how to canvass, how to be comfortable canvassing, how to talk about candidates, how to talk about ideas. So we're building up that campaign infrastructure. We're getting the message out there. We've gotten news stories published nationally in AP, locally, Spectrum One, all of our local news, at Ohio News. We are building coalitions with other candidates. Ideally, I want more independents, but I am working with the Libertarians, I am not officially working with the Libertarian Party. I want to be clear that they have their own gubernatorial candidate eventually, and they need to get 3% of the vote to win, and I want them to get 3% to be able to maintain their party status. But I am working with libertarians on an individual basis, Democrats on an individual basis, Republicans on an individual basis, to build a broad coalition that supports change, supports reform, because that's what we need. We need more choices. And I think there's something else I wanted to highlight, but I think I will call it that's me in a nutshell. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for that overview. And there will be a few other questions that I will ask that may bring out the point you wanted to highlight. First of all, I would like to bring attention to some of our viewer comments. So Siba Chamuza, our foreign ambassador from Togo, writes, I'm proud to see candidates who carry the transhumanist ideal, offering a progressive alternative to traditional and outdated visions. He also writes, without left-right polarization, political actors could make decisions without fearing labels and focus more on effectiveness rather than fitting into predefined categories. And this is one of our favorite areas of emphasis from your campaign, moving beyond left and right and restoring political competition, providing people some alternatives beyond this duopoly that dominates American politics today. And along the same lines, Alan Crowley writes, more people running for office, right on. And Daniel Tweed writes, standing for office is cool. Now, Mike Lazine, one of our longtime viewers, writes, Ohio may have far less pushback with getting things done with transhumanism, unlike his state of California. And it's interesting because California has a lot of, let's say, tech-inclined people, a lot of tech entrepreneurs, but it also has a very burdensome institutional and regulatory climate. It's very difficult even to build a house in California, not to mention start a technological revolution that actually scales and benefits large numbers of people. So I'm curious, Timothy, do you agree with Mike Lazine's assessment that there might be more of an opening for transhumanism in a state like Ohio? And it's interesting because Daniel Tweed also characterizes Ohio as quintessentially Americana. So there's something about the state that is emblematic of the American spirit. And part of the American spirit, of course, is innovation. It's self-determination. It's being willing to take matters into one's own hands if the institutional climate isn't working out. So tell us a bit more about the situation in Ohio today and what you hope to achieve for it. You mentioned the prospects of a renaissance of sorts in Ohio. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. Okay. So I love Ohio. I'm a lifelong Ohioan, and I really enjoy its history. And I mean, I'm not even that focused on federal national politics, and I just really focus on Ohio because I think it is a place of so much potential and so much history, but has fallen behind because of mismanagement and has been overlooked and ignored for far, far too long. I will say I would also love to probably talk about moving beyond left and right sometime in a future question, but I will focus on Ohio. Yeah, Ohio is quintessentially, to me, Americana. I mean, we are an extremely diverse state in terms of our, culture, industry, cities. We are one of the most urbanized states in the union. People don't think of it that way, but we are. We just don't have like one big city like Chicago or New York City, but we have tons of small and medium-sized cities, and these are the cities that I think are the most overlooked. But also we have, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, and they are all like very distinct styles of city. Cleveland has a very bit of an East Coast aspect to it. Columbus is a very Midwestern city. They still call it a cow town, even though it is becoming our center of finance and growth and technology. And Cincinnati has very southern United States city style and vibes. We also have the Appalachian foothills. We have our Midwest flat farmland in the Northwest. Toledo is the city of glass. We are an amazing state with a lot of potential. And down in Dayton, we have Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We have a history of way too many astronauts being from Ohio, an unfair amount of astronauts, in fact, that NASA basically has an article half apologizing for it. So we have the Glenn NASA Center. We have the Cleveland Clinic, which is a world leader in health care, medicine, bioscience technologies. Toledo is a leader in glass and materials technology, as well as Akron. And we used to make all the tires in the world, so we're still a materials science center. Toledo has the largest solar panel manufacturer in North America. Cincinnati exists. Sorry, Cincinnati, not to be rude. No, they have lots of stuff. They have lots of businesses, materials, research. Columbus is more of a center of finance, but with OSU, it's advancing technology and research hubs as well. For some reason, we are subsidizing Intel to build a chip factory there. We think we can be a Silicon heartland thing that is badly managed and probably not going to happen because of incompetence and the chip boom bust cycle. But yeah, I think Ohio has all of the potential to lead the world in technology and innovation. And I actually think because of our many small and medium-sized cities distributed throughout the state, as well as having the cutting edge in a lot of industries, we're actually better prepared for the 21st century economy, which is more decentralized, focused on smaller, medium-sized businesses, not the big factory world anymore. And then having all of those cities, all of those industries being well connected. And one of the things we've done well under previous administrations is build up our public university and community college system to the point that almost everyone lives within 10 to 20 miles of a community college or a university in Ohio, which allows us to, what I hope to do, quickly scale up our investments in innovation, in skills, in pure research, put more money into these things so we can help foster new industries, new economies. So whether Ohio is more open to transhumanist ideals than California, it's hard to exactly imagine. I think what we are eventually going to be more open to is innovation, is investment in the future, is change, because, and this gets us to what I like to call the Rust Belt Renaissance, because we have kind of suffered so much over the last 50 years, because we have been falling apart, we have been in a state of decay, in a state of hollowing out. So many of our communities have suffered from deindustrialization and got worse in the Great Recession. So many of our cities were dependent on one or two factories, and those shut down, and it's just been slow or rapid decay of increases in violence and crime and opioid overdoses and death of despair and people moving out. People have been leaving Ohio, and it's not great. But historically, where there have been bursts of innovation, renaissances, which literally means rebirth, it's after periods of great hardship, great suffering, because I don't know, people come away with more determination, more understanding that change cannot just be a bad thing because change is so desperately needed, that they are willing to take risks, willing to do more, willing to work harder because they've seen how bad it can be and they know it can only get better. And that's what we want to do. So I think Ohio will embrace technology and innovation. And I think what it needs are leaders, and it just needs someone to galvanize a movement for it, because I believe so much in the potential of the people of Ohio and our communities, but our other politicians really don't. They think they want to go back to the past, a past that can never exist, of big factories employing thousands of people, of, you know, that industrial sort of employment, which it can't happen today, and it's not going to happen in the future. I mean, Lordstown Motors plant, GM closed its plant there, and all of our big heavyweight politicians, from our senators all the way up to Donald Trump, were making promises that they're going to save this plant, they're going to save this car manufacturer, they're going to find someone else to move in. And 7 years later, no, they didn't. They failed. They couldn't, because not even the most powerful politicians in America can defy economic reality. And it's happened again. A paper plant closed in Chillicothe, and all of our politicians were like, we're going to save this plant. Nope, didn't happen, because they can't. You have to look to the future. You have to understand that the economy is changing, that technology is fundamentally shifting things, and we can't go backward. We can only go forward. We can only fight for a future. We can't long for a past that never even really existed. So Ohioans are ready to embrace that. They know that our establishment politicians, politics as usual, doesn't work and is not going to work. And I think that's why I am well positioned to not just ignite a movement, but actually win this election, because one of the things, Ohio has always been kind of viewed as a purple state, because sometimes we vote Democrat, sometimes we vote Republican in presidential elections. Really, we've always been pretty Republican for the last 30 plus years. Our state government has almost entirely been controlled by Republicans. We are a pretty one-party state. Democrats have no chance. But we're kind of purple and vote for Democrats because we actually have a massive base of apathetic voters who don't believe politicians can do anything for them, but sometimes get excited about a president who has a good vision. They got excited about Obama, and they got excited about Trump when he followed. And really, we have millions and millions of voters in Ohio. In fact, in 2022, 4 million registered voters, almost half of registered voters, didn't vote in the last gubernatorial election because they didn't think it mattered. They didn't think they had real choices. They didn't think it would change anything. And frankly, they probably right. We can mobilize these people. We can give them hope. We can give them choice. And all that you need is a good, solid vision of the future and understanding that the world can change for the better, that technology and improvement can work for them, that change doesn't mean someone else is worse off. You can grow the pie for everyone. And I think people have been afraid of that for a long time, that any more change could mean that they end up even worse off. But that's not how the world works. The world works when we all improve, we all benefit. Any improvement means we're all better off. We are more prosperous. And people need to see that we can do that. We can grow the pie for everyone. And yeah, I think, yes, Ohio is quintessentially American. Ohio has a very long history of innovation, of leading industry, of leading America in flight and space, in manufacturing and trains and everything. And I want to reclaim that history, but also look to the future.
Yes, thank you very much for that answer. And to add to that, our friend John H. More Life Please writes, he thinks more U.S. presidents have come from Ohio than any other state. Also, Neil Armstrong. And Siba Chamuza writes, people must choose between the traditional outdated vision, so what you mentioned about the politicians trying to bring back the plants that have closed, the results of which are evident, and the progressive vision based on the advanced means of our civilization to restore full dignity to humankind. So thank you very much for those comments. Mike Lazine writes, Tim is right on the money with what he is saying, and I am so loving Tim. I hope he wins. So thank you, Mike, for those comments. And now, since you wanted to discuss more about moving beyond left and right and the importance of that. I would be happy to hear you talk about that. Daniel Tweed writes, the biggest majority is the disenfranchised. And it seems to me the people today who are frustrated with both left-wing and right-wing politics are the disenfranchised, because they often can't find a lot of candidates who would represent them, and you're working to change that. So please talk about that to a greater extent.
Yeah, I would love to. I just want to add, we are tied for the most presidents. We can claim the most presidents. However, a little fact about that is 50% of them died in office. So eight Ohioans became president. 4 of them died in office. So it's really, I sometimes when Ohioans run for president, I'm like, yeah, you're really putting your life on the line there. That's a 50% chance of dying there. Another lovely fun fact about Ohio. But yeah, I am very much focused on trying to bring our politics beyond left and right. I'm not saying a politics that will be without division, but hopefully a politics that can focus on new things to argue over, better things to argue about, because left versus right has really fallen apart to we're basically making up problems to be mad at each other for, and it's not getting anything done. My background is in economics. I have an undergraduate degree in economics, which I went into because I originally started in computer engineering, but I read a book called The Origin of Wealth by Eric Beinhocker, which is about complexity economics. And I got really excited. I thought, okay, this is the future of economics. There's about to be a paradigm shift revolution in economic theory, and I want to be part of that. And when I got into my degree program and I actually talked to my professors and said, hey, have you heard of any of this? And I'm like, no. So that revolution, okay, it's something it looks like I have to go make happen myself, but complexity economics draws on complexity sciences and works of like the Santa Fe Institute, which I really enjoy. I'm not the best at this stuff because I'm probably not bad, but less interested in math than I should be to be really good at this stuff. But it starts to shift looking at economics and a lot of classical economics, and I don't want to oversimplify or create a straw man here, but a lot of classical and neoclassical economics originates in mid to late 1800s theories where we were mostly pilfering from the physics of the day. And the physics of the 1800s, while good for the time, not exactly how you would try and describe the world, and definitely not how you would try and describe the complex interactions of society and economy in the present world. So complexity economics tries to move away from that and moves toward looking at an economic system or society as an evolutionary, dynamic, evolving, ecosystem, a complex ecosystem. And I think that really changes the dynamic. Left versus right is sometimes simplified to, it's government versus market. But when we start to look at our economics as an evolutionary system, government and markets aren't opposing systems for controlling our society. They are evolved tools for how humanity interacts and does things. So really what, my origin drives back to the 2008 financial crisis and how economics neoliberalism went so wrong. It basically created its own doom. It brought the world to the brink. It created a massive financial crisis that cost millions of people their homes, their jobs, their savings. It detonated a bomb in the economy. And I'm from around Mansfield, Ohio, and we had a GM plant that closed in like 2009 or 2010 as a result of the financial crisis. And it's like, okay, how do a few thousand people over leveraging homes in Florida suddenly lead to basically the last remaining factory keeping my city alive is shutting down? How does that happen? And how can we avoid that in the future? I view the world as a repeating series of political economic paradigms, which is really something that only speaks to people like me who are obsessed with economics. But basically, the 2008 financial crisis created the politics of today. It created a vacuum because for the 20 or 30 years preceding that, everyone understood that there was a certain way to manage an economy. And if you just trust the politicians, trust the experts, everyone's wealth will keep going up. But then 2008 happened and it was revealed that that was a lie, and people rebelled against establishment politicians. And everything that happened since is a continuing rebellion against what they know to be wrong. The Tea Party, Occupy movement, the rise of Trump, the rise of Bernie Sanders, these are reactions to the fact that establishment politicians haven't been able to move beyond an economic paradigm that failed. And complexity economics is a better economic paradigm, but it's not taken off. It did not have the sort of institutional think tank, millions of dollars behind it that neoliberalism actually had for 20 or 30 years leading up to it replacing Keynesianism or New Dealism. For decades, it had that sort of waiting in the wings support. And when stagflation happened in the 70s, that was its moment to swoop in and say, here's an alternative that's deregulate, that's focus on supply side solutions, let's cut taxes, and that will make things better. And it was a good reaction to the overregulation of Keynesianism. I don't think it was the best reaction, but it was a solution to something. But you can't beat something with nothing. And when the 2008 financial crisis, people grab for the things that are nearest at hand, and there wasn't an alternative. And you know what they say, never let a good crisis go to waste. Well, we let a good crisis go to waste because we weren't ready. And so people turned to the nearest things at hand, and that was the extremes. That was radicalism of the left and right, which, you know, actually has been tried and failed, but people forget over time, you know, what the politics and economics of the early 1900s are things. So they turn to the extremes. I am trying to present essentially a new centrism that is an alternative to extremism, but also an alternative to a return to neoliberalism, both of which I think are bad. Complexity economics offers, in my opinion, a very strong foundation for a new politics and a new economics. It offers us good policy approaches that are a little more difficult to explain, a little more nuanced than just, hey, let's tax billionaires, or let's take immigrants out, let's find someone to blame. It's a little more nuanced than that, but we can market it, and it can break our current political divisions. Basically, Americans have become so entrenched in their worldview, so geographically divided, that they have built two perfectly unbreakable tribes that will war with each other till the end of time if nothing else changes. But my goal is to come here and shake up the board, introduce new ideas, new ways of thinking that can get through the partisan barriers people have built around them, because it's a new idea. And when they hear a new idea, they haven't been taught how to reject it. So when you get a new idea, people stop and think, and they start to think, okay, maybe that is something. Maybe I am open to something new. And the idea is, with complexity economics, which we really probably shouldn't, I need a better name, more marketable name for whatever philosophy, ideology this is. Radical centrism is a maybe, but whatever it takes to get people to start thinking about that, we can start reshuffling the board so that suddenly the people you hate are on your side, and the people that you're on the same side with before are suddenly you're not so in line with, and you start to reduce the partisanship, reduce the sectarianism, because it's no longer as clean cut as we made it. Suddenly your neighbors or your weird uncle aren't so different from you, and you start rethinking, hey, maybe they're a human being. And so that is really one of the things that drives me politically, this idea that with new ideas, with a new way of looking at the world, we can jettison left, right, and then jettison the partisan divisions that have allowed us to become so hateful, so tribalist, so othering of others, and start thinking for ourselves. Divisions will still exist. There will be, division within complexity economics, because it's not, no one has all the solutions to everything, no matter how well developed or how informed you are. That's just reality. I am also fundamentally a pluralist in that I believe no one knows everything. So we gotta be open to new ideas and change. But I think just every 40 to 80 years, you need this sort of reset. You need to bring in a new idea, a new paradigm that establishes. And over time, everything sows the seeds of its own destruction. 40, 60 years from now, we're going to know a lot more. We're going to have new theories, and complexity, if it rises to dominate now, 40 to 60 years from now, its contradictions will build up to the point where people will say it's time for a new idea, and that will be washed away too. Nothing is permanent. That's just the way of the world. But you're not fighting an existential war between two ideas. That's not reality. Our ideas have always continued to evolve, and they don't trace between two definite left versus right lines. That's not real. That's not the real way that's not real science. That's not real social change. That's not real policy. It's not, there are two options, choose. It's, the world is complex. Let's muddle through and keep looking for new things. So I am fiercely independent, because I know that if I identified as a Republican, if I identified as a Democrat, even if I was still pushing complexity economics, then even if one party accepted that, which I don't think would ever happen, but even if they did, then the other party would just reject it out of hand. You have to be able to reach people, and you can do that by being something they haven't learned to hate yet. And so there is, 5D chess in why I'm doing what I'm doing and how. But yeah, I think a genuinely new approach, genuinely new ideas can sort of end the left versus right divide. And you can call it post-partisan, you can call it radical centrism, you can call it whatever you want. But what it is this idea that neoliberalism doesn't work. The ideologies of the left and right, MAGAism, whatever that is, or socialism, those don't work either. So let's try and find something that is focused on the best cutting edge research of our time, and try and figure out where we actually differ on that.
Yes, thank you very much for your answer. And Daniel Tweed writes, Timothy gets it. He also writes that the things we can agree on and make progress on are far more important than past divisions. He thinks that progress usually comes from the center, but Allen writes, no, progress comes from highly motivated minorities that are willing to goad the rest of the country to action. But I think some of us who want to move beyond left and right are in a minority right now. We are seeking to inspire people who have natural sympathies with us, but who wouldn't take those steps on their own. They might just resign themselves to falling on one or the other side of the left-right dichotomy. And that's why for the Transhumanist Party, it has been very important not to align ourselves with either the left or the right, because the moment you do that, you start playing the duopolies game. And sometimes I've had to resist a great deal of pressure to not make such alignments, but I think that is ultimately the path to long-term success, and your campaign, Timothy, is an example of that. Now, I do want to ask you more about complexity economics. Here is, again, the link to the book by Eric D. Beinhocker, The Origin of Wealth, the Radical Remaking of Economics and What It Means for Business and Society. So I myself had economics as one of my 3 majors. I even had a peer-reviewed paper published on Austrian economics in the Quarterly Journal of Austrian Economics. I'm curious to hear you more explain to a greater extent about complexity economics and what key ideas distinguish it from other schools of thought. For instance, how would you compare and contrast it to Austrian economics or monetarism or Keynesianism or even, say, Marxism, since there are still a few people who adhere to that school of thought? How does complexity economics relate to each of these other schools? Where does it agree? Where does it disagree with them?
Yeah. A quick note to the earlier, does change come from the center? Does it come from small minorities? You know, it's both. I describe myself as a radical centrist because I'm not I'm not a moderate. I strongly believe in what I think, and I'm going to fight like hell to see it get done. Yeah, I'll probably compromise where needed because that's normal, but I believe in something. I'm part of a small group that believes in it, and I'm going to try and convince more people to believe in it. And the power of our democracy is such that just getting out there and doing things can have a massive impact, especially when you're offering something a little bit different, because it resonates and it grows and it expands so quickly. New ideas kind of can travel faster than just the same old thing. Like I can get way more mileage out of just sharing a new idea free on the internet than the Democrats and Republicans will get spending $1 billion on ads hitting the same points they've been hitting for decades. But yeah, with complexity, trying not to be, I try and be an economic pluralist as well as a political pluralist. So I don't say the Austrian school offers nothing, the Marxism offers nothing. I don't say it. But Austrian school monetarism, neoliberalism, neoclassical, Keynesianism, Marxism, they all kind of draw on the same basic classical economic or more neoclassical economic framework that does put things into the sort of physics equations of supply and demand, steady state equilibrium, stuff like that. Which, another thing I want to emphasize, complexity economics is another tool in the toolbox. Everything that has come before continues to have a great deal of value. I mean, you can do a lot with a supply and demand graph. You can figure out a lot about the world. But complexity starts to offer a little bit more. Again, I'm a little bit of an economic pluralist. I force myself to say I don't just think complexity is the right thing. Everything has a little bit to offer. and Keynesianism, Austrian, all of that. And complexity incorporates a lot of that. We should really teach more economic history in our economic programs, not in school, but in our economic programs. We should really be doing that so people understand the history of how we got here. People should be reading Smith and stuff. But to me, in simple terms, I think complexity is a little more freedom focused than other schools of thought. It understands humanity, humans as information processors, and it has a lot of respect for spontaneous order or the invisible hand, which I'd like to take this moment to say that Adam Smith said the invisible hand like one time, and it wasn't really talking about what people say it was talking about, but it's still, the concept it's trying to convey is also still quite good, of spontaneous order, of the idea that lots of people acting in pursuit of their own interests or just in their own way will result in something that was unplanned but is beneficial to all. And complexity tries to understand the world through that way, understands the value of markets and decentralization and people being able to make the best possible choices for themselves, because basically 1,000 of the best trained, best educated bureaucrats in the world, or 1,000 of the best trained, educated oligarchs, CEOs, whatever in the world, is never, ever, ever going to outcompete in information processing or efficiency millions and millions of people just making everyday decisions for themselves. You can't centrally plan an economy and make it work. It just can't. But the government doesn't have no role. It has, and this is probably good to add that I certainly have my doubts about AI also ever being able to compete against what billions of people engaged in trillions of exchanges and activities can figure out in a decentralized way. But complexity doesn't say the government has no role. It recognizes that government is an intrinsic part of society, that society is an intrinsic part of markets, and the government shapes things. When we intervene, we should be thinking in those terms. How are we shaping the market? How are we crafting incentives? And that is a lot of how modern economic policy thinks. How are we creating incentives or disincentives? But it needs to take a step further and understand, we don't have homo economicus. We don't have the perfect rationalizing agents. We have people who satisfy us. We have people who operate by rules of thumb. We have people who also, their opinions and their tastes change based off of other people, based off of government, based off of society. So really, policymaking has to be a perpetual process, because what we found from regulating the financial sector is that the financial sector is going to innovate around any regulations, and sometimes for the best, sometimes for much, much worse. Sometimes you try and regulate them and they create a new financial asset that can somehow destroy the entire global financial system overnight. So you have to be adaptive, essentially. When it comes to the intersection of policy and complexity, it gives a lot more weight to the experimental approach to policymaking, of the idea that we try something and then if it doesn't work, we try something else, we change it. How policymaking works now is everything is so gridlocked, so partisan. We put everything in the world into one or two big bills. We pass it with like a 2-vote margin, and then we never open it up again to make changes, because if we do, it all falls apart and it will never get passed. The Affordable Care Act is a good example of this, in that it was made with so many compromises and had so much pork just to get enough people on board. And then we passed it. And then for the next, what's it been, 15-ish years now, everyone has been saying, oh, we want to change it. We want to reform it. We want to repeal it. We want to make changes. And it just keeps going basically as planned from the beginning, because no one can start opening up to make fixes, because if you do, then you run the risk of it totally being repealed, totally being dismantled, or being taken in a direction it was never intended. So we don't have that reactive policymaking. We don't have policymaking that takes into account what has happened, how something is being implemented in the real world, and saying, okay, we need to make some adjustments. We don't have that. So policymaking markets, it's all information inputs and outputs. And if you don't take in new inputs on how things are actually working, then you're flying blind. So, and it's not even like complexity can solve that, because that is a partisan issue. It's really, this is why I am in politics and not just like pursuing your career in academic economics. Is because actually solving the problems means building political power around new ideas, building political consensus to make something happen. But back to kind of how economics or complexity policymaking functions intersects, it does take a preference to doing things at the lowest practical level, decentralizing, giving more power to local governments, local actors to implement things. And it does support trying things at small scales, having small scale rollouts of multiple possible policy solutions, seeing what works and what doesn't, shutting down the things that don't work, and then trying to just scale up the things that do, or try them in a new place with tweaks that matter to the specific history, the specific geography, specific demographics of the place. It's not one size fits all solutions. It's not top-down outlooks on how the world works. I mean, if you try and look at the economy from the federal level, then it's just, okay, GDP is going up or unemployment is going up or down. But when you dig down and you say, okay, well, let's look at a place like Mansfield, Ohio, it's actually always historically like 2 or 3% higher in unemployment. Its GDP is always growth way lower than nationally. And if you're only looking at national statistics and taking national policy, it doesn't solve it. So if you want to solve a problem like a small Rust Belt post-industrial city is suffering, then big national programs that say, okay, we're going to, I don't know, give everyone healthcare. I mean, it helps the people, but it doesn't solve the underlying problem in that community. And so you need to give direct grant funding, in my opinion, to that city to give it the power to help itself, help solve its own problems, because a city that is rapidly deindustrializing, depopulating, it can't tax itself out of collapse. That's just going to make it less desirable. So it does need outside inputs. And that's becomes what the role of the state government or the federal government is. It's more about collecting and distributing money, setting standards, and kind of collecting, centralizing information and analyzing that and giving that information in a usable format to communities. So it's not as fun or exciting as confidently saying, oh, I'm going to impose tariffs and America will reindustrialize, or I'm going to tax billionaires and somehow that will make everyone more equal or more equitably miserable, perhaps. No, it's a little more complex. It's a little more, okay, we have to solve everything at the local level. We have to get people involved in solving their own problems because that's how it's going to work. We get even the most powerful, well-managed government in the world cannot get anything done meaningfully if it doesn't have the support and the shared vision of basically everyone else in the society, which is, again, another reason why I am in politics, because I believe very strongly in the power of campaigns. I think democracy is our American heritage, where other countries have whatever national identity is a little more religious identity or something. America has, because it is a nation of immigrants, of many ideas, of constant movement and immigration, so you don't even have those like family ties. You can be in the same country but thousands of miles apart. What has united us as a country is our ideals, not our institutions as such, not our traditions. It's our ideals, it's democracy, it's the idea that we organize ourselves by saying, let's talk this out and set a vision. So I run for office because I understand from a complexity viewpoint that it's not just what the government sets the rules, or it's not just how corporations act, it's how the people are going to act and react. And you have to care about culture. You have to care about the networks that exist between people, between businesses, between government. You have to care about the networks, you have to care about the people, and you have to care about what they think. So running a campaign is it's one of the glorious times where you can go to someone's door, knock on their door and say, hey, can I tell you about what I think of the world for like 20 minutes? And they'll be like, yeah, okay. Otherwise, if you're not running for office, if you're not running a campaign and you do that, they're like, please leave me alone forever. But in a campaign, people are open to hearing new ideas. And I think Trump, I think Bernie, I think I was a Yang Gang guy in 2020, still not a Democrat, but I was a Yang Gang guy. And these were campaigns that changed how people thought. They changed how people acted. They got people excited about new ideas. I mean, Yang had this humanity first slogan, and it was very common, even I felt it, for people to think when they are wearing that Yang gear, when they're wearing humanity first stuff, they have to be like, I have to be a good person. I have to help people. I have to care about others and be nice and understand that they are a real human being too. And I also did a lot of cool stuff and basically try to coordinate, funding, mutual aid stuff. But that's what you get to do with a campaign. And that's what I'm trying to do with my campaign. It's as much about winning and gaining power as it is about spreading the ideas, spreading the idea of complexity, of looking at the world from a more nuanced perspective. And also, if you go to my website, like the three core ideals are integrity, freedom, and improvement. Improvement is like our national improvement, but it's also very much in the vein of John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay, national Republicans. They believed in national improvement, but they believed in self-improvement as part of that the responsibility of people in a republic and in a democracy of a free people is to better themselves, to improve themselves, to care and do more for yourself, your community, your neighbors, be a good citizen. And that if we actually want to solve any problem in this country, it's not having the best ideas in government. It's inspiring the most people to do the most good, to try and reach for better, to try and do better, be better. And so that's kind of why my focus in government is not say, I'm going to solve problems. No, it's I'm going to give you the tools to solve problems. I want to invest in our research and training things in our universities or community colleges. I want to provide capital so people can start small micro businesses and try and scale them up. I want to give people the tools they need to live the best lives that they can have, but I also need to inspire them to want to do that, because you can have the most generous education programs in the world, but if people are doing it not because they believe that they can be a better person, but because they think it's just the thing to do or a simple way out, it's not going to work. And this is one of the things that is kind of changing in our universities, I think, with AI over the next decade. Like, our culture has to change when it comes to what a university degree means, because for so long it's a signaling device. It means you could get through college. It doesn't mean you learned anything. It just proves that you were good enough to get through it. But because AI makes it possible to write a paper, to solve math problems and get away with not actually learning things, the value of that piece of paper suddenly drops to nothing. So it has to be, you're going to college because you want to learn. Like, you have to want it now. We have to change our culture in that way. So I realized that somewhere at the beginning of this long rant was the question of, what is complexity? How is it different? But it recognizes the importance of culture, the importance of networks and people, and it understands that we don't really have surefire ways of making something happen. So we have to explore, we have to experiment, and we have to get outside the government versus market notion. And we have to get a little dirtier, a little more complex with how we try and solve things. We have to try and actually change people's minds. And again, not a clean cut solution, not exactly the stuff people want to hear. Oh, you have to go convince people to care about the world, and also you have to care about it yourself, and you have to care about yourself. Not exactly the thing that resonates, but that's the truth, and that's what America has always been. We used to be a nation of tinkerers, essentially. The 1800s was a revolution of lots of small improvements in technology, because people spent their time inspired by the cool mechanics of the day and saying, I could probably make something a little bit better. Let me go tinker with something. And that's probably the future of our economy. It's not huge corporations. It's not huge factories employing tons of people. We have to start shifting ourselves to that decentralized small business entrepreneurs, micro businesses world. And also, maybe it doesn't mean employment how we thought it was, of you get a job and you do that 40 hours a week and that's enough, and people demand that much labor out of everyone. I mean, the future is going to be a lot of those jobs automated away. So we need to, and again, this is getting bigger and bigger picture, but we need to start thinking about what happens when we don't have that much demand for labor, or when there isn't that reliable career path, and you have to start making something for yourself. That gets much harder, and the social contracts start dissipating. I am obviously a UBI guy. I am a universal basic income is a necessary future, not just the future. It's probably what we need right now. It's probably what we should have started 10 years ago because, and UBI aligns very well with a complexity framework, with a market framework, because it's basically guaranteeing that everyone has market power and the ability to make decisions for themselves, which is what markets are very good at and rely on, having good informed people who are not just price takers, who are not just slaves to a monopoly. It's people having choice, people being able to say, I'm going to buy this because I want it and it's what's best for me, and I actually have the money to do it, and I'm not going to settle for the lesser value good, the lesser alternative. I'm going for what is best for me, and that sends good price signals. So UBI, it works beautifully with complexity economics and a market framework. And it's just going to start unlocking our ability to solve problems. And I'm going to stop myself now and just see if anything you want to dig into more in all of that or a different question.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that response. And you made many excellent points there. Daniel Tweed responds, we need to become more comfortable with complexity, and there are definitely aspects of complexity economics that invite us to become more comfortable with it. Before we delve into complexity economics a bit more, Alan Crowley, thank you very much for your generous contribution to this enterprise. He writes, no central economy, and I think we definitely need something other than central economic planning to get us through this transitional period in our history and in our civilization. As for Adam Smith, Alan writes that Smith was his best buddy on a 10-hour car ride. Audiobooks rock. And Daniel Tweed writes, Smith was more of a humanist than he gets credit for. John H. writes, he understands that some consider his book A Theory of Moral Sentiments more important than The Wealth of Nations. Well, John, actually, I have read both of those books. So I read The Wealth of Nations from cover to cover in college, my second year of college. It's actually back there on the bookshelf behind me. But I read The Theory of Moral Sentiments even earlier when I was a freshman in high school. And the way to access it back then was to find a free version online. I think Project Gutenberg had a free version. And I would literally print out pages using the printer at my high school, and I would carry them with me in a little handbag because they didn't have ebook readers or smartphones back then. So that was my way of creating portable reading materials for myself. But yes, I've read both of these very well-known and highly lauded works by Adam Smith, in part to form a background of my understanding of economic thought, but also Enlightenment thought, since Adam Smith was very much a thinker of the Age of Enlightenment, and this is important for our virtual Enlightenment salons, since he did try to understand complex systems and systems of incentives. And as you pointed out, Timothy, the invisible hand is a metaphor for spontaneous order, which is a concept that later economic thinkers like Friedrich Hayek elaborated upon. And when I hear you describe complexity economics, I do see a lot of similarities to Austrian economics. First of all, this emphasis on spontaneous order, this emphasis on human beings not being homo economicus, but having more heterogeneous preferences and incentives. So they're not going to act like the characters in neoclassical economic models all the time. Also, decentralized information. This is very much a part of what Friedrich Hayek and Ludwig von Mises emphasized as well in their writings. And the decentralized nature of information also undermines the efficacy of central planning. So Luis Arroyo writes about cybernetic management of the economy. And even if you have very powerful AIs, you don't have access to all of the discrete bits of individual knowledge and information that we gather just in the course of our day-to-day experience. This often isn't information that we write down or post or codify somewhere just because we don't have time, but we do utilize it on the go, so to speak. I think where the difference between Austrian economics and complexity economics is expressed is more in the approaches toward policy. So from what I've heard you discuss, complexity economics is more open to iterative empirical experimentation, where you run a lot of smaller scale experiments. As you pointed out, you select in favor of the experiments that show positive results. You weed out the ones that don't. Austrian economics tends to be more axiomatic deductive. So it uses first principles to derive implications of policies from more general insights about human action, such as the action axiom, the discipline of praxeology that stems from that. But with complexity economics, I think, based on what I've heard you say, there aren't really as many foreordained conclusions or as many deductions as can be made right from the starting point. You have to run the experiments. You have to try out a variety of policies in order to figure out what works and what could actually help improve human well-being. So what would you say to those characterizations?
Yeah, and I think economics continuously in its history goes through these phases of being either more theory focused or more data focused, and it's like one or the other, but you obviously need both. If you don't have a good theory, and if you're not consistently refining theories on how to understand the world, how to understand data, then having all of the data in the world isn't really going to help you much. So you really have to have both. When it comes, the experimentation is a little more on the applied policy side, but yeah, it comes with this idea that you don't really have certain answers. You don't know things for sure because whatever system you're trying to understand, whatever system you're trying to regulate is going to change and evolve. So that's, they actually often talk about a little more focus on simulation than modeling, understanding how simple rules, simple changes can result in totally unpredictable outcomes, how a big splash can sometimes result in nothing happening and everything evening out, or sometimes how a small splash, a small little change will cascade into something huge and unpredictable. So it's really a commitment to understanding network effects, understanding evolution. I think when it comes to it, it definitely takes a lot from Hayek and Austrian economics, or reaches the same conclusions. But no, they're definitely reading Hayek over there. I think with complexity, for me, it's almost the focus is actually on innovation. It's because in economics, often neoclassical economics, innovation, technology is just like this exogenous thing. It's this constant, or it's a shock. It's just something that shows up. It's not incorporated into the theory so much. But that's really what I think the core of economics is we are innovating, we are evolving, we are getting better, we are selecting better traits and replicating them and then experimenting. So really, we could reduce it all to just that evolutionary formula of selection, replication, and diversifying. But so, and really good economics, economic theory, academic economics in the future should be way more open to teaching and understanding different schools of economic thought, of being economically pluralist, of recognizing that everything has a lot to offer, that it should not be dominated by one school of thought. That's how you find yourself at a dead end down a blind alley and with nothing else to turn to. And that should be probably true of all schools of thought in academia and science, that you continue to foster the other ideas, because you never know when they might strike gold or when your other theories hit a dead end. So yeah, I think it draws a lot on that, but one problem for me is that there have not been the think tanks, there have not been a lot of policymakers who are out there trying to adapt the theories and lessons of complexity to actual policy. Where does it actually apply? And that is the task I set for myself. So I'm kind of currently just navigating, flying blind, trying to take ideas and turn them into actual policy, and then the even extra step, not just turning them into policy, but then turning them into politics, into sound bites, into things I can quickly explain to someone else that they're like, okay, that's a good idea. So really, I advocate for a much larger project of exploring and expanding complexity economics and then complexity policy and applying that.
Yes, thank you very much for that response. And indeed, this exploration of economics as part of determining what good policy would be is a breath of fresh air in contemporary politics. So many politicians operate just on the basis of slogans, or just on the basis of party allegiance, or really tribal allegiance to the red tribe or the blue tribe. But we really need to explore more sophisticated ideas and systems of thought in order to really implement solutions that work. And I would also like to note there's a bit of a bidding war. So John H. contributed $5.01 through the super chats, and Daniel Tweed contributed $5.02. Do we hear $5.03? Well, we shall see. But thank you very much to John and Daniel, as well as to Alan once again. Now, I also wanted to note that Luis Arroyo referenced the work of Paul Cockshott, who is a Scottish economist who worked on ideas for implementing a planned economy through computers, and Luis posited his work as the answer to whether a planned economy can take into consideration real-time input. Here's a link to his Wikipedia entry. I have not read him, so I can't opine on his work. I will say, though, I'm skeptical just because of the immense complexity of human interactions and experiences, and how real-time that input is going to be. Sometimes when I go to a store, I don't know what I'm going to buy. I may have some general idea of my preferences, but I have to see the goods in question before I actually make a decision. Now, we've had a very robust discussion of economic policy. I wanted to follow up on a comment that you made where essentially when paradigms shift, including in economic systems, often there's a lot of preparation that is done, and then there is a moment to swoop in, so to speak. And I wonder, for the kind of vision that you're articulating, or for the transhumanist vision, do you think a moment to swoop in is likely to happen for us soon? And if so, how is it likely to manifest itself? What would be some signs that now is our moment to swoop in and actually have a good chance of becoming the next paradigm in economics, politics, culture, all of the dimensions needed to really restore our civilization and take it to the next level?
Yeah. Okay. So this is feeding into some of my more pseudoscientific theories and beliefs that I enjoy, like generational theory, Strauss-Howe generational theory, which is extremely pseudoscientific, but yeah, it feels right. It feels like they're onto something. Or 50-year violence cycle, or looking at party systems, fifth party system, we're in the sixth party system, switching into the seventh party system. So I do think about that a lot in those terms, in terms of a sort of cyclical nature to our history and our society that essentially tracks with really human lifespans, human memory, stuff like that. And the fact that we are living longer and really politicians are living longer political lives, I think, is somehow stretching out these periods, like the cyclical nature. Like if you believe in Strauss-Howe generational theory, we're in a crisis. And some people, like Steve Bannon, Trump's advisor, who also believes this fun pseudoscientific theory, thinks the crisis started with 9/11. I personally think it started with 2008. Either way, it's been going on for 20 plus years, and that's kind of long. And it may be because people aren't dying. There is that saying, science advances one funeral at a time, where is essentially where for new ideas people don't change their minds. Really, just people who formed ideas when they were 20 suddenly come into power and can change things. That's one outlook. So I think we're in a crisis. I think the time to change, the time to make this happen started with then. It's still, the window of opportunity is still there, but it is closing. So I actually think the time for us to succeed, for complexity to succeed, for transhumanists or a new party to succeed is right now. And I can't say for sure when the window will close, but I have to think it is going to happen. I mean, the old paradigm died in the 2008 financial crisis. Neoliberalism, Reaganism died. And then we have this vacuum, but nothing good was around to fill it. And that's why you see the rise of MAGAism, Trumpism, and that unfortunately seems to be settling in as the dominant paradigm, like Bidenomics, stuff like that. It was kind of the light version of Trumponomics. We kept a lot of the tariffs. We made the state more powerful, invested more in industry and infrastructure, tried to pick and choose industries. So my whole thing is, my God, I don't want to live under the Trumpism paradigm for the next 40 years. And it is hard to see that as a stable paradigm, especially since it is a cult of personality. Who knows what happens after this? But it's also hard to imagine right now what happens in 2028, what happens in 2032 that can form a lasting political majority. Because one of the things that has characterized the last 16 years is that every 2 years we basically vote the other party out of office, and it just keeps switching back and forth because no one is happy with anything anyone is offering. No one is happy with the ideas being offered, and no one has the time, the political power to actually implement an agenda. So at some point, someone has to start winning and winning big and for a long time, like 6-8 years of political power to implement a real agenda, because otherwise you just keep going back and forth. You keep half starting things and you get nowhere. But it's hard to imagine, what does 2028 look like? Is it like JD Vance versus AOC or Gavin Newsom? And it's, you don't really see any of those people uniting the country for a long time. You don't see the outcome of that election as doing anything but convincing at least 25% of the population that all hope is lost and it's time to burn the system down. So, maybe there is someone, a white knight in the Democratic or Republican Party who is going to emerge, wipe away the old, and rally the country around something new. But right now, for me, it's hard to imagine. So that's one reason I still think we have a chance right now to defeat the Democrat and Republican system, to bring something better. Not just the chance, but the obligation to try and make that happen, because the alternative seems to be constant acceleration of decline, of decay, possibly even violence. And so we need something that can unite this country. And I don't think it comes out of the Democratic or Republican parties. We have to build something new. I had hoped Forward could do something like that. I think, in a cyclical form of history, this is right now, like maybe it's 1854. Maybe the Republican Party is of 1854 is just formed, and in the next 4 years is going to eat the Whigs, it's going to eat the Free Soil Party, and it's going to form something big that eventually wins in 2032, maybe even 2028. But at the same time, maybe that doesn't exist yet. Someone still has to found that new party and then start uniting, I think, the Pirates, the Transhumanists, the Liberal Party, whatever's left of Forward, into the party of the future, the party that finally unites this country around a common vision of what we should be, what we should do, and takes us into the 21st century, sees us through the 2050s and 2060s. And my thinking is that window is there. That was created by the 2008 financial crisis. Maybe someone could have done it then, but they didn't. People like Obama still basically clung to neoliberalism, and so we didn't have that big shift. I have to imagine that this window closes eventually, that either the Democrats or Republicans pull something together. Maybe the Republican Party implodes itself so much, or the Democrats implode themselves so much that the other can dominate. And it's probably not going to be an ideological paradigm I like. It could be Trumpism, for all we know. That could happen. The window could close, and then it's another 40, 50 years before that window opens again. And I'm prepared for that eventuality. I don't look forward to it, but I am prepared to understand that I need to spend the next 4 decades laying the groundwork for complexity. Maybe it's time has not come. Maybe the time for transhumanism, for technology, future-focused parties of freedom, liberalism, individuality has not come. And we need to start laying the groundwork for that. But for now, I believe this is still the moment, and we have an obligation and an opportunity to do everything we can to form the new party, the new paradigm, to defeat Trumpism, to defeat extremism, to defeat the Democratic and Republican parties' establishment, and forge something new and set the course for the country, and because of America's role, the world, for the next 50 years, to be something optimistic, something future focused, something where we invest and care and have a more ideal world. So I think the time is now, or I think the time is 50 years from now. And I could be wrong. I mean, I'm basing that entirely on my limited vision of history and the world, but I think we're clearly in the moment where everyone is upset with the existing parties and no one has good ideas. So it's the time for people who want change to act. And I hope it's now. I hope we can do it now. But that's the thing. If it's now, it has to be now. It has to be, whatever I'm building, I need to come in first or second or a really, really strong third, to then keep growing, to keep mobilizing to 2028. My plan is I'm building an apparatus to collect me 5,000 signatures and then maybe collect some other independents enough signatures to form a joint ticket. But then I want to transition that to, in Ohio, to get minor party status, you go collect 55,000 signatures and you get a political party. And I want to build that political party. And I am trying to work with other political parties like the Transhumanist Party, liberals that share, I think, a lot of commonality, and also independents. There are independents running for governor in Maine, Florida, Michigan. There's the Forward Party. There's No Labels offshoots. There's a lot of people. The groundwork is there. If this is the 1850s, we have the know nothings. We have which I guess I'm using as a positive. We have the free soil. We have Republicans. We have the dying Whigs. Let's unite. Let's do this. Let's lead the country forward through the crisis into a grand new vision. Let's do it now.
Yes, thank you very much, Timothy. And you've definitely injected some urgency into the situation with your answer, because you believe that we are nearing the tail end of this tumultuous period where a new paradigm really could take hold. And if we don't act quickly, perhaps another paradigm that we find less palatable, like MAGAism, might instead be the paradigm for the next few decades, which I definitely would not want to be the case. Now, one of my frustrations actually with Joe Biden's administration and many of his policies was that they seemed to perpetuate a lot of the elements of Trump's policies and Trumpism, the protectionism, the excessive crackdowns on immigration being just some examples, the unwillingness to consider technological solutions to a lot of the issues facing the country. And of course, the mudslinging that comes from both sides is not a paradigm that I would like to participate in. But to your point, we've observed this downward spiral in American politics over the past 2 decades, most certainly, where it seems every election season, the rhetoric keeps deteriorating, and there are more extreme provocations on each side. Political violence has become, unfortunately, a very real phenomenon. We had 2 assassination attempts during the last election cycle, and we have political assassinations happening this year, with the killing of Charlie Kirk being the most notable, but also legislators in Minnesota being assassinated. So this is political violence that can affect people of all persuasions, and it should be roundly condemned. And I hope that this more transpartisan approach, as I like to call it, that you've articulated, can help to diffuse some of these tensions and get people to focus on what can actually unite us, what can actually help all of us in terms of policy solutions. Now, I know that our time is advancing, and I wanted to make sure that Art Ramon could ask a question or fit in a comment. So Art Ramon, please go ahead.
Yes, I volunteered for Raul Grijalva years ago, and it was just 2 election cycles. He definitely had a machine of volunteers, and that's really important. After volunteering twice, I didn't do the canvassing, but I did more of the data entry from all the signatures they got. And he definitely had a well-oiled machine of volunteers. And it's a lot of hard work here in Arizona with the heat and everything. And now Adelita, his daughter, has basically inherited that machine and has now become congressman to replace him. So it's quite a machine of volunteers that you need. And I see that as being one of the biggest hurdles, is having that volunteer machine of people to go out there. I mean, it's too bad we can't get robots to do it. That would be the technological solution. Get some robots to go out there and canvass neighborhoods, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. But what are your thoughts? I mean, how are you building your machine of canvassers?
Yeah, I am. So I have worked in politics, but I have not worked in Democratic or Republican politics very directly, certainly not with any establishment. So my experience is basically the shoestring campaign of no budget, just trying to get people inspired and building everything from scratch every single time. And that is unfortunately basically where I am now, but I have made a specialty of, okay, how do you create the most news? How do you get the most reach? How do you get the highest impact for your dollars spent? And I have a pretty good track record of that, but to win, I have to take it to a much higher scale. And I do believe that there is a path for me to win because my opponents are like historically weak candidates, and as well as the parties are historically disliked. But what I have over the last 4 months, I've recruited a good number of volunteers, again, a lot of political neophytes, and I set the priority as collecting signatures, and I'm happy that we've gotten 1,100 so far, but that's not the best rate in the world, and I would like to be doing a lot better. So what I am doing as we enter into winter, which is not the best canvassing period, is I am shifting my focus to the campaign infrastructure building, to coordinating volunteers, training them, getting them on board. But one of the things I recognize, I mean, I have to do everything better than my opponents to win. I have to out-innovate them because I'm never going to outspend them, and I'm never going to have the political massive operations that they have from 2-century-old parties that have been building and building for years. So I have to outdo them every way I can. One of the things that I need to do for this campaign is capitalize on basically memetics. I need to create a memetic campaign. I need to firmly establish the ideas, the ideology behind my campaign such that anyone can get behind them and start sharing them. Because when I worked in the Forward Party, this was always my issue with them. They were anti-platform. They were anti kind of ideas. They were just, oh, we're about character. We're going to support candidates and let them make their own policy ideas. But that made it such that actual party building could only be done by direct contact with people who were in the party, because being part of the party meant you worked with the people in charge. It was very top down. Whereas being part of a movement means you believe in the same ideas, and anyone can do that. Anyone can believe and share an idea. Not everyone can have the phone number of the right person in the state party to reach the national party. So I believe in movement building. I believe in ideas, in driving this to begin with. So I intend to spend the next 3 months focused incredibly on that and getting my message out there and because I believe I have a message that can resonate. And being an independent lets that message resonate more. In January and February, we are currently mapping out a basically town hall tour of the entire state, setting dates, going to most cities, most towns, most counties in Ohio, 2 or 3 a week or more. And we're going to advertise and be happy to just get like 5 to 10 people at each of these events. And that, for me, is what one can best do. Give people the opportunity to hear, to learn, sign the petition, and then to volunteer, because I keep getting new signups, new volunteers every week. And just the more we can get that message out there, the more people who will come to us, and ideally more people with a little more experience to help get other people trained and to basically build a truly grassroots campaign. Yeah, so that's basically what I'm doing, focusing on high impact results, trying to leverage things to the best of my ability, things that get people's attention through social media. I am on all social media, just very aggressively trying to make sure the low-hanging fruit of being discoverable, being on things. I on Ballotpedia ended up on Wikipedia. Some of this stuff is stuff other independent candidates or minor party candidates or even major party candidates can't figure out. They don't do that. So we try and do the low-hanging fruit first and climb what I call the ladder of credibility, of viability. I keep getting one more rung up on what does it take to be a serious candidate? What does it take to be taken seriously? Because, the first step was literally forming a campaign committee, doing the basic paperwork, which not everyone clears that hurdle apparently, but then getting on Ballotpedia and then getting our first major news story about us, which I was extremely happy actually happened day one just from my announcement. I thought I would be screaming into the void for a few months, but no, we got that, got a lieutenant governor, started getting campaign manager teams, just becoming more real, more credible, to the point that people have to, it's, first we will be ignored. We're trying to get to the point where the Democrat and Republicans start fighting us, and then it's just, cascading down from there.
All right, yes. Thank you. Thanks for coming to the show.
Yes, thank you for that response. And I had actually been meaning to ask you about the Forward Party and what disappointed you about them, but you answered the question. It's the lack of a clear platform. The Forward Party used to stand for some ideas when Andrew Yang played a more central role. He had his plan for a universal basic income, for instance, and he had a strong support of various electoral reforms like ranked choice voting, but then the Forward Party got rid of its platform, and the question arose, well, what does the Forward Party actually stand for other than being against the system? And this is where I think the Transhumanist Party, the Pirate Party, and other more principled parties have a clear advantage.
I will also add to that I went in with Forward knowing that they didn't have a platform, so I was like, okay, well, I will build up a party that is extremely committed to democracy. I made it so we had a process that in Ohio that our members would eventually be able to make a platform like what we wanted, because they are right to not do a top-down platform where Andrew Yang says this is what the party stands for, get on board or get out of the way, but they didn't actually set it up so the members could form a platform either. And we were just supposed to be, I guess, foot soldiers for any candidates that they decided to back, which is not what a party is. A party is it's what connects the people to government. But really, not just that I didn't think they were standing for the right things. It was the people running Forward National just didn't seem to actually want it. They didn't seem to believe in building a party that can defeat the two-party system. They didn't have the enthusiasm, and I couldn't push through a party that didn't have the belief of its leaders.
Fair enough. Now, as we have about 4.5 minutes left in our virtual enlightenment salon, I did want to ask you a transhumanist question, especially since you have a Star Trek Magellan shuttle behind you on your bookshelf. So, transhumanism, of course, supports a wide variety of emerging technologies, from the technologies of life extension to space travel to artificial intelligence and automation. What are some of the emerging technologies that you think stand to benefit humanity the most, and also can be most effectively advanced through policy reforms?
Yeah, so I actually believe most of our problems can be solved by technology. And in fact, technology that already exists or is near to existing. It's just the problem of getting that implemented, taking it to market, and getting market saturation, like, infinite energy. So I am very technology and innovation focused. I want things like, new nuclear energy, like GMOs, artificial wounds, farming that is efficient and uses resources better. So I think one thing that is an economic fallacy is the idea that labor saving is bad, that eliminating jobs is bad. Make work is not good. Automation has the potential to free humanity for a ton of things, especially in the manufacturing or data input management, stuff like that. Anytime we can automate a process, a repetitive human process that brings us no joy to do, is a good thing. And I want to support that and create the environment that is supportive of that, including getting the public to support it and making sure there are no losers, that automation doesn't mean mass starvation, mass unemployment, because it shouldn't. It should mean a world of abundance. So we need to start adjusting our policy now to what that means, start preparing people for a world of mass automation, have a UBI, have training, have skills to start very specific businesses, stuff like that, and to continue to compete in the world. I have always been an advocate of genetically engineered crops to advance food security, to advance food abundance, and the other cutting edge technologies. mRNA vaccines are amazing. I think we can cure so many diseases, and not just make them chronic. We can cure and prevent diseases, and we need to put so much more funding, so much more support into this, that infinitely better lives are just a few steps away, a few investments away, and we have to care, we have to invest, and we have to be open to that. So that's why my whole campaign is sort of the innovation industrial complex that is Ohio. Invest in our universities, invest in our peer research, and do everything we can to take technology from the lab to market, because that's real innovation. It's not just invention. You have to apply it and you have to spread it.
Yes, thank you very much for that response, and of course in your support for genetically modified organisms, mRNA vaccines, automation, and the beneficial effects of automation, not focusing on make work, focusing on elevating real human prosperity. We are very much aligned, and I am quite pleased that the Transhumanist Party has been able to endorse you in your campaign for Governor of Ohio, and thank you so much for joining us and outlining some of your key ideas and the theoretical thinking behind them. This has been a truly enlightening experience. I wish you all the best in your gubernatorial run. We will follow it with great interest. We will help spread awareness of it so that we can all live long and prosper.